Hello, and welcome to Sunny Days Podcast, the podcast for folks to start living their grooviest, most magical lives. I'm your host, Alex the Good Witch, a professional psychic, healer, speaker, and coach. I use my degree in biochemistry, experience as a mental health provider, and spiritual gifts to align your subconscious programming with your conscious desires, guiding you into your dream reality. Here, you will receive practical guidance, insight, and stories that you can apply to create your happiest, most fulfilling life today. If you're ready to feel lit up, capable, and inspired, I invite you to join me on this sunny day. Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the Sunny Days podcast. Today's episode is all about the system of good and bad. So, most of us have this internal system of good versus bad. And within this system, good means that we will be rewarded, and bad means that we will be punished. So a lot of times this is taken on from childhood, but the thing is, this system is deeply embedded within us throughout our adult lives as well. Just as any subconscious program, it is embedded within us. It is mostly taking over our thoughts and our actions without our conscious permission, because the subconscious is what's really running the show, until we end up looking at this system, dissecting it, and working with it. So that's a bit of what we'll be doing today with this good versus bad programming. So as far as good meaning that we receive reward and bad meaning that we receive punishment, this starts to be reflected in so much more than just certain situations where we might want a child to behave either good or bad. So for example, when we have this programming, we actually start to reflect this system, even with relationships, as far as us and the universe, or us and spirit, or God, or our angels or guides, whatever you want to call it. But that spiritual piece, it's not just us within our worldly life and our worldly relationships. So for example, I see this a lot, and this is often how I know that this system is really deeply embedded in somebody, is when they take this human system and they apply it to spirituality as well. So for example, saying something like, oh, like the universe is really gonna, blow up in my face on this one. The universe is really going to screw me over because I made the wrong decisions. I made these bad or wrong or shameful decisions. And now I'm assuming punishment. Or this is often what comes up a lot too, is that when we receive a punishment, we then backtrack and assume we must have done something wrong. We must have done something bad. This is what we deserve. This is us receiving the punishment because we messed up, we failed, we did something wrong, bad, or shameful. So when something doesn't go our way, and again, I'm using this example of kind of us with the universe. So sticking with this, it's not necessarily something didn't go our way, as far as it was like a direct causation with us and our human life, our human relationships. It may feel like something that's a bit more out of our control and therefore up to the universe. When that doesn't go our way, or when that goes to shit, we internalize that as, I must have done these things wrong. I must have done these things in a way that was bad. And that is why this has happened. So we'll do that and apply that programming in hindsight as well as the cause of this punishment. And the same thing goes for rewards. We'll often think that if we do things the right way, or the high vibrational way, or the good way, the virtuous way, that we are going to receive reward. And then therefore, if we are receiving reward, we backtrack and think we must have done something or been the kind of person that deserves this reward. Just like when we receive punishment, we must have done something or been the kind of person who receives punishment. Well, this system does not serve us for a number of reasons, and I'll be going over some of those in today's episode. It does not serve us. And also at the core, this system was intended to bring us closer to reward and avoid punishment. That's why this system was created. That is why this subconscious programming was created, was to try to manipulate situations that bring us closer to reward and further from punishment. So we'll also be going over why this system, in fact, doesn't necessarily do that. And a lot of the times it actually can keep us away from reward and toward punishment or towards things really just not going our way. I don't like to use the word punishment when it comes to us kind of dissecting and going into what's really going on and a new system to take on. But as far as that old system, it's really seen as punishment. It is seen, interpreted as punishment when things don't go our way or things, situations, or people seem against us. And that's another way we can really tell if we have that programming is that, let's say our partner is upset about something and they are not talking to us right now, right? They are dealing with their own thing. They're withholding right now. I'm not necessarily condoning that or saying that's okay, but that is the situation. We then internalize that as, you're punishing me. You're punishing me for what I upset you about. This is a punishment. That is that internalized system at play, rather than seeing it as, I did something, it hurt this person, or they took it as something that was hurtful, and now they're withdrawing because that is their response or reaction to it. And that's kind of just like the objectivity of the situation. That is kind of just like the cause and effect, a consequence, a natural consequence, whether that be positive or negative. It's just a consequence of what happened, right? Not necessarily a punishment of what happened. So the first thing that I want to start with as far as starting to shift this system is, first, I'm going to give you some examples of how this system just proved to not be true. Like I said, this system did not bring me closer to reward and further from punishment. And you can start to reflect on your own examples of that just to help yourself get a little more comfortable with, hey, maybe there's another way of looking at things, getting your brain a little bit more comfortable with, hey, maybe this isn't the role we have to take on in order to receive reward and avoid punishment. There's other ways, starting to kind of like poke holes in it. And then we'll go more into what is going on here, why this doesn't work out the way that we think it is, and ways to start shifting into a new system. So for my first example, I have anxiety. So something that I'm always working on to better myself is, how can I work with this anxiety? How can I work with this anxiety in a way where it's not taking control of or overtaking my thoughts and behaviors and decisions, right? So for me, my system of good and bad is good being following my intuition, following what I really want to do, and bad being letting my anxiety win, letting my anxiety take over, letting my anxious systems be what I end up going with, letting them take over and take the lead. So as you can see right off the bat, with this system of good and bad, it gets applied in a lot of different ways. So objectively, those things may not be good or bad. But for me, because I am someone who is working on anxiety, or quote unquote knows better as far as my anxiety goes, I'm well aware of it, and I know better of how to work with it and how to act and not act from it, that good to me is a success in doing so. Good to me was, hey, I did the best thing, the right thing, versus bad being, I allowed my anxiety to take over something that I know better about or that I'm capable of not doing. So that is where good and bad system was applied in this specific example. And I'm letting you know this because with you, you'll start to see how within this system of good and bad, you really apply it to a lot of unique circumstances. It's really based on you and what you're like and what you're working on and things like that. They're not always objectively things that are good or bad, right? Like, it's good to not punch somebody and it's bad to punch somebody. It really starts to seep into things that are a lot more nuanced, things that are a lot more not necessarily objectively good or bad, but we are now categorizing them as such because this is a system that we use. So anyway, in this story, that is the specific reflection of the system that we are focusing on. So in this story, I get free concert tickets. Me and my fiance receive free concert tickets, which we're very grateful for. I'm very excited to go to this concert. And this concert is for a band called the B-52s. You may or may not know the B-52s. That's fine. For us, we knew some of their songs. I knew of them, not necessarily like a huge fan of them or anything, not a huge fan, just like very neutral to it, but mostly excited that these are free tickets to a concert, and that's a fun thing to do. So we're happy to be going to this concert. Well, it's time for us to head to the concert, and the both of us are exhausted. The both of us are just so tired. We really don't feel like going. It feels like pulling teeth getting us to go. So now the system of good and bad comes in. So the system of good and bad for me and my unique situation and this specific system would tell me that good behavior or best or right behavior would be for me to have a boundary and to just let the person know that, hey, we're not going to be going to this concert. I apologize, but we're really tired. We appreciate the tickets, right? Just have that open communication, have that boundary. That would be like me on good behavior based on, my module of this system. Bad behavior would be what ended up winning, which was the people-pleasing, anxious tendency. And I was talking to my fiance, Rob, and I was like, no, we have to go. Like, we have to go. We got these free tickets, and so many people wanted a hold of these tickets. And the person that gave them to us chose us to give them to. So then these other people, like if anyone found out that we didn't even end up going, those tickets went to nothing. Like, that didn't feel fair to them. And like, I was putting that like emotional responsibility on me, right? And on. I'm sure we've all kind of felt that way about something before. And I let that guilt and that anxious people-pleasing tendency win. And that's what we ended up doing. We ended up going. As far as this being good versus bad, I did the thing that was bad or that was wrong or that was a fail of me working with my anxiety and working with myself in that way. I failed at that according to that system. So within this system, I would expect that behavior would lead to the situation blowing up in my face. And I would call it a punishment. I would say that, I shouldn't have done that. I knew better than to listen to my people-pleasing or anxiety. And whatever negative situation may have come from that would have been seen as a direct cause of that quote unquote negative behavior, right? Here's the thing. We go to the concert and we get there in time for the opener. And the opener is this DJ and it's cool. We're like, well, we're having a nice time, right? And then all of a sudden, the MC says, and now welcome to the stage, KC and the Sunshine Band. And remember, we're there to see the B-52s. And we already saw an opener. The opener was the DJ. So when they say this and they show the KC and the Sunshine Band like logo on the screen, I immediately am like, are the B-52s fucking with us? Because the B-52s, if you know them, they're like a weird band, and that's their thing. I don't mean it in a derogatory way. Like, they're weird. That's like what they do. And I'm like, is this them like fucking with us? This is like a weird thing to do, to like pretend they're another band as they come on stage. I don't know. It's some joke, right? So I think that, and the reason that I'm like trying to like figure this out and rationalize this is because I love KC and the Sunshine Band. If you know me, if you like see me in my setup, I love the 70s and 70s music. And if you know KC and the Sunshine Band, you know that they are the epitome of 70s music. Epitome. So anyway, again, you don't have to know these bands to follow the story. So anyway, KC and the Sunshine Band, the actual KC and the Sunshine Band, comes onto the stage. I don't even realize that they're touring, let alone, I honestly probably don't even think they're alive. Like, I would not have realized that I could even have this opportunity in my life. I thought this opportunity would have sailed long ago. And lo and behold, here they are performing, and I'm watching them. I start crying. I start crying and shaking, and I've never had this experience at a concert. And I've heard other people having this with bands that or artists that they just feel so like connected to. So I was just having that moment of just complete ecstasy and like, oh my God, is this real? They're real. And just like this outer body experience. So one of the best days of my life, so incredible. It really was them. And they just happened to be opening for B-52s. And it was an absolutely incredible experience. Remember that that experience only happened because I went with the failing decision, the wrong or the bad or the shameful decision. I only got that experience because I ended up people pleasing. I was being a people pleaser. I let my anxiety take over the decision. And that is what got me that experience. So that makes no sense as far as the good and bad system that like completely derails it. That makes no sense. I should have had that experience suck in some way and then be kicking myself and been like, ugh, I get it. I shouldn't have, made my decision out of anxiety. I get it, universe, like universe is punishing me because, I knew better and didn't make the most high vibing, self-aware decision. This is not what happened at all. Another great example of this that is more universal. This isn't a specific story, and I'm sure this applies to you in some way, is procrastination. So procrastination is often seen as a bad trait, as a bad behavior, and something that leads to punishment. And yes, of course, we see plenty of times where it does lead to a negative consequence, right? And same with the people pleasing. There are plenty of times where that leads to a negative consequence. That's not what we're talking about here. And I'll start to dismantle this more and more in this episode, but let's go with the procrastination. So yeah, there's plenty of times where that leads to a negative consequence, totally valid, right? But remember, I'm using the word negative consequence versus thinking of it as a punishment, because there are plenty of times where myself and others have procrastinated. And while they're procrastinating, they're like, oh, they're getting on themselves. Like, I shouldn't be procrastinating. Like, I know I shouldn't be doing this. This is bad. Like, it's going to end up blowing up in my face, whatever it is. But then there are times where it doesn't, and it works out. And it works out well that you ended up procrastinating. One example of this that's just coming to mind is my fiance Rob received money from his mom's will when she had passed away, and he just had like the mail of how you receive that. I don't know how that process goes, but the mail saying like how you go about claiming the money. So anyway, for the longest time, like he would just continue to get that same letter on repeat and not really do anything about it. And he was procrastinating it. He was procrastinating doing that task and getting on himself like, oh, like I should do that. And I was even wondering, I'm like, is there like a deadline on when you need to do that? And it was just going on, and it was something that would have been seen objectively as, that's not the right thing to do. You got to get on these errands, these responsibilities when they come. You can't just like procrastinate them. Well, after a while of procrastinating it, he ends up quitting his job to open his own gym. We're both entrepreneurs. And he then claimed that money and used that money to start his gym. And if he had done the right thing, the successful person thing, that thing, he would have claimed the money a while ago, more promptly, the more responsible, that's a good word, the more responsible thing. He would have claimed that money earlier on. And then he wouldn't have been able to use it directly to start his business. Yeah, he may have still had some of the money left. It wasn't a lot given the situation, but he may have had some of it left, or maybe he would have had to use it on something else, maybe just like our rent for our apartment. But now it went directly into the business, which meant the world to him, just emotionally, to have that connection of her helping him start that dream. And like, I don't want to start crying on this podcast now on this tangent, but that is an example of procrastination not necessarily needing to be labeled as bad and being assumed that it's going to lead to punishment. And I get this a lot with clients, where I'll get clients that feel really blocked on something. And again, feeling blocked on something a lot of the times is, hey, let's work through this block. There's something here, and it's keeping you from, these wonderful things and these positive consequences. And there's like all this abundance and amazing things on the other side of this block. Let's work through it. But every once in a while, I will have a client who has a block and I'm working with them, and I'm really getting the sense that this block is fine. This block is meant to be there right now. They're meant to be blocked in this specific way right now. And later on, they will have access to work through this block and go to the next thing. But it's actually best for them to have this be blocked right now. Specifically, I get in my chakra reading and balancings, every once in a while, I'll get someone's third eye who is blocked. And sometimes, it's, hey, this is what you can do to unblock that. A lot of the times, the messages with this specifically is, it's meant to be blocked right now. And that's the message I received. You're not meant to know the direction to take. I know that you want to, and it feels like you're more responsible, or you have more control over your life. You have your shit together, if you know what you're doing and where you're going. So you want that because that's good. That's the good behavior. And it's bad to just, not know and be wandering and just be super uncertain about it. But with that specific person in that reading, it's coming up as blocked. And the message is that it's supposed to be blocked. Don't worry about it. You're supposed to be blocked. Just like with the other blocks that come up with people, if they're blocked on a certain project, or they're blocked on this thing in their relationship, whatever it is, a lot of the times it comes up where it's like, it's supposed to be blocked right now. That it's just supposed to be like that right now. That's perfectly fine. It's just that innate need from that programming to be good, to do things the right way, the responsible way, the good, successful way. And that way is deemed like, hey, I need to get rid of this block. I need to work on this block. I'm blocked, and that's bad. That's not always the case. It may be there for a reason. So from these examples, you can start to just pick apart this system and realize that, hey, A doesn't necessarily equal B. This certain deemed good behavior doesn't necessarily equal reward, and this certain deemed bad behavior doesn't necessarily equal punishment. So now we're going to take a look at what is this programming really doing? Because as we can see from poking some holes in it, that it's not always doing what it's intended to, why it's there in the first place, or what we think it's doing, which is we can manipulate the situation to be good, to have good behavior, to then receive reward. We can avoid being bad or bad behavior to avoid punishment. That it's not actually doing that. So what it's really doing, and why it doesn't work as far as getting you closer to punishment and closer to reward and avoiding punishment, is that it's really a shame cycle. It's really a shame cycle. And with any shame cycles aren't necessarily helpful. And being in a shame cycle isn't going to necessarily set you up to receive positive consequences and rewards. So with this, we try to manipulate ourselves and therefore the situation to be good, to receive reward. But as we do this, we put this kind of pressure and expectations on ourselves. And in doing that, if we naturally don't meet those expectations, just because we're human and we're bound to not do everything exactly the way that we're trying to in order to be that level of good or reach that expectation, like inevitably we're going to quote unquote fail at doing that. When that happens, there is this shame that becomes our mindset, is that we are shamed. We didn't do it right. We weren't enough. We failed. We were wrong. We were bad. And then now we're expecting a punishment. Even though it wasn't necessarily about we directly just went out and did something that was wrong or bad, we actually had this system of good that we were trying to achieve, but naturally, maybe we didn't get there or achieve it. Now we're automatically bad or wrong or shamed because we didn't reach that level of good. And now we're expecting punishment because what comes from being bad or wrong or failure is this punishment. So now we're expecting punishment. And based on this system, we feel like we deserve it. We deserve it. We put this upon ourselves. We did this to ourselves. Punishment is just part of what we just did to ourselves by not being able to be good, the righteous, the successful, the responsible way. And now that we're expecting that punishment, once anything negative or just not really the best outcome, or just rubs us the wrong way, or may objectively actually be totally fine, may even be good, but now we've got this lens of like, I deserve punishment and I'm bad. We have this lens of I'm bad. We will inevitably receive that punishment that we are expecting. Like I said, this punishment can be just like a natural negative consequence of things, maybe something not being the best, maybe something rubbing us the wrong way, or something that's totally fine, maybe something that's actually positive. But because we have this lens of I am bad, we are receiving it as a punishment. So then when we receive it as a punishment, and now that just further hammers in that system of like, see, when I fail, when I don't do the thing that's good or right, I get punished. And that gets deeper and deeper into our programming. And then same with the reward, where the more that we try to get to that reward, when things inevitably, maybe go well or positively in a way that we like or expect, we're like, yes, that was a direct reward of being good. It really just depends on what lens you put on. Did you put on the lens of what I did was deemed good and worthy? Or did you put on the lens of what I did was a fail or wrong or shameful? Basically, whatever lens you're going to put on, you're either going to see reward or punishment, and it's going to further hammer in that system. Well, where this becomes a problem is, like I said, that shame. Because once we get into that shame cycle, we're already in it if we have this programming, is that we're in this shame cycle. And at the end of the day, we're bad. At the end of the day, we're bad. And what we're really doing is trying to get from bad to good, trying to get from bad to worthy. Because if we've been bad at all, if we've been punished at all, if we failed at all, we're already bad. That is like the state that we are assuming deep down, subconsciously assuming that we're defaulting in. It's not like we see ourselves as this neutral state that then bounces back from bad and good. We really see ourselves as inherently bad and trying to move into the good to be giving ourselves the reward. Because then whenever we try to move into the good and for whatever reason we don't really get there, we're still defaulted back as bad. So that's where a lot of the issue comes in, and why I say it doesn't serve us is because when we see ourselves as inherently bad, we're mostly expecting that we deserve things to not go well. We deserve punishment. We expect punishment. All of that is going to be that lens, and we're going to see a lot of that reaffirming that belief. And when we're in a state where we feel shamed or bad, or that we have to work to be good enough, to prove ourselves worthy, to be good, when we're in that state, we're not really in the best place to make the kind of decisions and actions and have the kind of mindset that's going to bring us these positive consequences and these wonderful things. We're not really in the best state to create the best life for ourselves and to see these wonderful situations and opportunities and people in the way they treat us and show up coming to us. We're not really in the state to make that happen. not because we don't deserve it and because we're being punished and because we're being bad, which is what your system will tell you, but because you're in a state of shame. You're in a state of shame, and that's probably leading to being in a state of fear, and like fight or flight and things like that, which is all just an unhelpful state. It's not the most optimal state to make clear decisions, to make decisions that are so solution oriented, and to make decisions based on confidence, make decisions based on self-worth, and you deserve it and you can do it and make it happen and take the opportunity. You're not in a state to make those kinds of decisions. And then that's going to lead to, not really receiving the best outcomes on the outside, which is again going to just show up as like, I deserve that, it's punishment, blah, blah, blah. But that's not what's going on. It's just you're not really set up to create that life that you deem as rewarding and good and whatnot. So this is why I mentioned earlier on that this system can oftentimes lead us away from what we deem as reward. It can lead us away from it. And instead of avoiding punishment, it actually brings us closer to what we deem as quote unquote punishment. That is exactly how that happens. So now I want to take you through how you can start to shift this system of good and bad. So first of all, see everything that happens as a consequence. And I know that in our regular like vernacular that the word consequence has a negative connotation, but consequence meaning it's literally something that happens as a response or reaction from the initial input. You have an input and then you get an output back. That's a consequence. It can be positive, negative, neutral. It can be any way you look at it, really. It is what it is, but it's the fact that it is a response from something else. That's the consequence. So see everything that happens to you, everything that's going on, everything you're getting and not getting, situation, see whatever it is just as a natural consequence. It's just a natural consequence, not it's a consequence of meaning that you're being punished. There's no like personalization to it. It's not like this consequence is this consequence is happening because you are being punished. That's like personalized. That's taking it personally. Same with the reward. It's still like taking it personal, like you are being rewarded and that is where this consequence is coming from. No, just see it as like an objective consequence. And naturally, there are some consequences that are more challenging or feel like more of a negative outcome or a positive outcome. And that's fine and that's valid, but it's all just a consequence. It's not like you are good or bad and that's why this thing is happening. It's just a natural consequence. Just like I mentioned towards the beginning with the example of the relationship, and let's say you did something, whatever it was, and your partner feels hurt by it and they are now withholding and withdrawn and you're like, why are you punishing me? Well, it's just a natural consequence. I'm not saying either person is right or wrong or should or shouldn't have done any of the things. I don't know what the situation is, but whatever you did, whatever it was, I'm not saying it's right or wrong or anything. Whatever you did ended up hurting that person. And that's how that person feels, whether that's right or wrong for them to feel that way. And because of that, they are now withdrawn and withholding. It's just a natural consequence. It's not to punish you for whatever your initial action was. So when you start to see things as natural consequences, that is very helpful because you're not going to internalize it as, hey, I was good or I was bad. This shame cycle, this expecting of like, oh, well, yeah, I knew that like I'd be punished for this, or yeah, the universe is punishing me, or this person is punishing me. Nobody is punishing you. It kind of starts to break you out of that mindset and of that cycle, seeing it as more of a natural consequence. And then moreover, when you see things as a natural consequence, you can now like do something about it instead of just internalizing it and letting it define you as good or bad. Now you can actually do something about it. Like, let's say that was a natural consequence that person is withdrawn. Well, now you can just start to see, and reflect on what was it that you originally did that made that person feel hurt? Is that something that you want to work on, or is that something that, you genuinely feel like that's how you would do it again if you could? Just start to reflect on the situation, and then, later in this example, be able to talk to them in whatever way, whatever conclusions you came to. You'll also be able to be more open to like this person's side because they're not punishing you. It's a natural consequence. You'll have more understanding and empathy for them and their side, which is going to be more productive for you in the long run to be able to see them as just a person who is responding, and it's not necessarily anything against or toward you, and it's not their action isn't defining you. So that can really free yourself a lot from these kind of dynamics, seeing things natural consequences. And this goes for everything, not just people and how they're treating you, situations. If something doesn't go your way, see it as just like a natural occurrence, a natural consequence. If something doesn't go your way, well, not only can you reflect back and see, hey, maybe is there something that I can learn from this or do it differently next time? But also you can look forward. It's a natural consequence. Okay, is there anything I can do about that now? Is it best for me to maybe let this be and kind of let it go? Or is there a solution that I can try to implement with it? Can I be more creative of how I go about this issue that I'm facing? It gives you like the freedom to freaking like do something about it and to improve things rather than just get caught in that shame cycle. And inevitably, it's so interesting because that shame cycle makes you feel like you have no control over anything. It makes you feel like you're stuck in it, like you're a victim to it. And you're just really stuck in that cycle and have no say about it. And it was spawned, it was only created to try to have control, to try to manipulate the situation. Like I said, obviously it's not working with how it was intended because at the end of the day, you end up feeling powerless to it instead of getting the power that you were seeking. But when you see things as a natural consequence and allow yourself to do something, to reflect on things, to do something about things, you're giving yourself the power over the situation, the power to have an effect on the situation, to be constructive with the situation rather than be a victim to it. So it's very interesting how this programming was trying to get you control and power, but ultimately it leaves you powerless. A lot of our programming does that. But once we start to reprogram these things, we're really giving ourselves that power and that freedom back, which is exactly what we do in the first half of Freebird. It's all about freeing yourself from these internal dynamics, from all of these systems and programming that's going on, freeing yourself from them and giving yourself your power back. Because as of right now, your power is most likely held in your subconscious programming. Like I mentioned, that's what's really running the show. So if you're consciously wanting certain things for yourself and they are not happening, it's because your subconscious programming is driving the ship, and it's not driving the ship in the direction of your conscious desires and your conscious wants. So Freebird for the first half of that is really, really digging into these programmings and making the shifts in order to align your subconscious programming with your conscious desires so that you can start creating the life that you want and having that say in it. And it gives you that power back. And I'm mentioning that it's the first half because the second half is a lot more external. The second half has a lot more to do with what to externally do, action that you can take that's a lot more tangible or has to do with situations and people. It gets a lot more external and action oriented, as opposed to the shifting of all of the programming and aligning that subconscious direction with your conscious desires. So anyway, that's Freebird. I just thought I'd share because as I was talking, I'm like, this is literally Freebird. I'm like, this is like what we do, going way deeper into it. So anyway, on this tangent, if you are interested in Freebird, I'll put the link in the show notes since I mentioned it here. Definitely check that out. And yeah, it is an amazing program. It is so life-changing and really just gives you that power to create the life that you want. And I love it. I love being the facilitator of it. It makes me so happy to have people step into the program and just step out into their best life. So anyway, I could talk about that all day. I'm just so passionate about it. But like I was saying, with the good and bad system, it does take away your power. It does make you a victim to the circumstances and a victim, a slave to punishment and reward, and just trying to play that game of being good and not being bad. But then inevitably, you're going to do things that are deemed as bad in the system, and you're already inherently seeing yourself subconsciously in that system as bad in the first place and getting stuck in that shame cycle. So it's really not going to get you where you want to go, and it's not going to get you towards the good and the reward. It's keeping you further and further from it. So see things as a natural consequence. That's going to help a lot. See things just like as an objective, natural consequence, accepting, what comes up in the situations and working from it from there, having nothing to do with you. It's almost like if you're in the dating world, let's say, and someone isn't interested in you, they to you, maybe from that standpoint, it feels like a rejection, but objectively, they're just, not interested in you, and that's okay. It's kind of that energy where it can really be seen as this like rejection and I'm bad or I'm being punished, where in reality, it's just like that's just what it is. And it's totally fine. It's totally fine. And there's things that you can do with that. If there's anything constructive there of maybe why they're not interested, you can look at that and see if that's something you want to work with. If there's not, then that's okay. And you don't want to be with this person anyway, because you want to be with someone who is interested in you. So it's totally fine that you're not going to be dating this person. It's like that. It's same thing with like maybe like a job opportunity where you don't get the job. It's not this rejection. It's not that you're bad. It's not that it's personal. It's just that you didn't get the job. With those situations, I think sometimes it can be easier for us to start to see them as like, that's just an objective thing, and what can I do about that? What do I want to do about that? That is a natural occurrence. So you can think of it kind of like with those analogies, but that's what's happening on like a deeper scale and a more attached scale. And it's a system that kind of gets projected onto anything and everything. But it is a very similar energy to those examples, if that's helpful for you. So the last thing that I want to leave you with to help you shift out of the system of good and bad is using words like helpful and unhelpful. So yes, it's true that there's certain things that we do, like let's take the procrastination, where maybe it doesn't work out well. It doesn't lead to a positive consequence. Like I said, it's just positive or negative consequence. It's not a punishment. Maybe, maybe a lot of times it doesn't lead to that, right? That's valid. That's normal. Like I said, there are natural consequences to things. So what we can say instead to still validate that is a normal part of life is that behavior, that action or whatever it was, may be helpful or unhelpful, right? In that situation, maybe it was unhelpful to procrastinate. Maybe it wasn't of service to you to procrastinate. It wasn't helpful. Whereas maybe, doing it earlier, more promptly would have been helpful. It would have been more helpful. It would have led to a more productive consequence, right? rather than like a reward versus punishment. It would have been more constructive. Would have been a more constructive consequence. Maybe procrastinating in this situation led to a more destructive consequence. That's okay. That has nothing to do with you labeling yourself, deeming yourself as good or bad. And you can see how it's a lot more flexible. Like, let's say it was an unhelpful action that led to a destructive consequence. Well, that's not the end. It's not like there's a period there and like that's where your life ends at that moment. No, you can now take different actions that lead to a constructive consequence, and you can start to change that consequence and that chain of consequences. Whereas, the punishment and the reward, it's a lot more fixed. If you're punished, that's the thing that you did wrong. It was bad. You're punished for it. It's kind of like an end of story thing. Same with the reward. Oh, you're good. You get a gold star reward. That's it. Whereas consequence and helpful and unhelpful, and is this constructive or destructive, there's a lot more flexibility there. You can continue on to work with it. You can redirect. You can be flexible with it. You can go in a different direction. You can try a different approach. You can start to rebuild things if it was a destructive consequence. So start using words like that, because naturally you're going to you're going to label these things as something, right? So start to play with those words rather than good, bad, reward, punishment, right, wrong, success, failure, things like unhelpful, helpful, or beneficial, or was of service to me, or wasn't beneficial, was constructive consequence, destructive consequence. Try using words like that. That is going to be very helpful. And then I just want to point out too, if you happen to have my 12 Laws of the Universe planner, this is one of I talk about this a lot in one of the laws. Let me see which one it was. I feel like I know what it is, but I don't want to say the incorrect one. Oh, yes. Was it this? Okay. Ooh, so it's kind of perpetual transmutation of energy as well, which is June's law. I know that if you're listening to this podcast a bit more in real time, it is almost June. Oh, here we go. Oh, my, yeah, this is a big one. I talk about it more too in the law of cause and effect, which is July, which makes sense, like cause and effect, like I'm talking about consequences. So I do go in more into that there. And then I also do in relativity. Oh yeah, for sure. The good and bad system. I could talk about in the law of relativity, which is September. So if you don't know, this is my 12 laws of the universe planner. So there are 12 laws of the universe. I did not make up the laws, but I made up how I present them, how I teach them, and all of the tips and the ways to practice them and implement them into your life. I created all of that. You may be familiar with the law of attraction. That's a big one that people are really into. Well, there's 11 other laws. So I go over all of them in this planner. It is a planner for the year. So you literally like try to use one hand and open that up a bit. So you can like write your to-do list that has actual dates and everything like that. But since it's in April, I know that, you may not have been able to use the planner if you don't have it already for January through April. You can use it like a book, like a workbook, like a self-help book, because it still has all of the teachings of what the law is and all the ways to implement that. So you can totally use any of those laws from the months that we pass and like read through those and like do the practices and implement them into your life. It does not have to be, you just start where you are now. So yeah, feel free to pick it up. I do have a couple left. So feel free to pick it up to use the beginning part as a workbook, and for learning and teaching and growing. As you continue to feel free to use the planner part from wherever you pick it up from. Anyway, I thought I'd share that. I just like realized that like I use a lot of what I'm teaching, but I give more examples, more practices for you to take on in that planner. So yeah, like I mentioned, if you want to go deeper into this kind of work, I do have two things for you. One being the Freebird program, and that is going to be a very in-depth program that is going to be very like transformative work, both internally and externally, to free yourself to be able to create the life that you desire, to be able to live your dream reality. And we go much deeper into these systems and how to shift them. And that is just like the first half of it. Like, it is seriously such a catalyzing program. I freaking love it. So in the show notes, I'll have the link to Freebird. Totally check that out. And then I'll throw up the link to this too. Like I said, I do only have a couple left, but if you're interested in it, I would love for you to check out my 12 Laws of the Universe planner. It's so cool. And like, you get to learn different topics than what we just talked about today. So yeah, check those both out depending on what you're needing. If you're needing to go deeper with things, or if you want to have fun with this planner, check out the link in the show notes. And that is all I have for you today in episode 2 of this podcast. So I hope that you all can see yourselves as worthy, as innately worthy, unconditionally worthy, and your behavior, past, present, and future, has nothing to do with how worthy you are. What comes up in your life, the circumstances that you face, the way that you're treated, things like that have nothing to do with how worthy you are. And I hope that you can start seeing things as a more self-empowered, natural consequence. And it's just really up to you to help yourself, make decisions that are most helpful to you. And if you don't, you're human, and that's fine. And sometimes they work out. It's just a natural consequence. It says nothing about you and who you are and how you should be labeled as. Procrastination can lead you to, put in that money into your new business. People pleasing can get you to see one of your favorite bands. It's okay. So I really just hope more than anything, you take away this patience and understanding with yourself, because that can also take you very far in creating your dream reality. So with that, I will let you all go. I thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to see you in episode 3. Thank you for tuning in to the Sunny Days podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and catch more of my free content by following me at Alex the Good Witch on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. If this episode resonated with you, please take a screenshot, post it in your stories, and tag me on Instagram. I appreciate your time here with me today. Peace and love to you all, and I will see you in the next episode.